called an Insta360. It's a VR camera, virtual reality. It's an 8K camera that allows you to control what you're seeing. If you click or use your finger or the mouse or even your remote control with the little arrow pads, you can change where the camera is looking. And on this trail, which drops about 2,000 feet, there's lots of interesting things to see, and now you are in complete control of what you see. But I also know that there's many of you out there who don't like this type of video, and I hope you'll bear with the rest of us who think it's kind of interesting. And please know that I'm also working on my other traditional videos, which are very time-consuming to make. They take hundreds of hours, and, well, frankly, I haven't had the time to do it because with inflation, which my rent alone is up 40% in 3 years, and of course everything else is up almost that much. Well, I've had to spend more time doing work for paying clients instead of doing stuff for basically free on YouTube. So please bear with us and don't cancel your subscription because I got more fancy stuff coming. It'll just take me some time. Anyway, this is the SHAFER Trail. The entrance is just before the Canyonlands Visitor Center. And it's an all gravel road, but these days it's so busy, it's really pretty smooth up here. And the slope is pretty easy as well. It gets a little worse when we get a little lower. I'm doing it in an all-wheel drive Hyundai Tucson hybrid, which I've got just a few months ago. It's not a bad vehicle. It's much better than the Subaru I had. Don't bring a Subaru Forester on this road. I did it twice in the Subaru, and it completely destroyed the rear suspension and most of the front suspension. It was very expensive to fix all of that, so I wouldn't recommend the Subaru, but hopefully this Hyundai will do a little bit better. The top here section drops, I think, 1,200 feet. I've read somewhere else it's 1,600 feet. And this drop-off is if you pan over and look down, it's quite a steep little drop. But it is very smooth, and it gets a little bit tricky when a car or a motorcycle is coming in the other direction. But this trail is quite popular these days, and it's really quite smooth up here at the top. It takes about 15 minutes to get off this really steep shelf part. And after that, actually, is when it gets much more technical. I think I'll tell you a little bit about the weather. I did this in mid-June, and the temperature was, apparently it hit 102 that day. This is fairly early in the morning, about 9:30, and it was already, fairly toasty, but a lot of people are afraid of this road. They think it's harrowing. When you're driving it, you're concentrating on the road ahead, and you're not really looking around or looking down, so it's not scary at all. For passengers, well, that might be a different story, especially if they're on the cliff side. But overall, it really is an incredibly safe trail. Okay, I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to let you just pan around. You can stop it, pause it, look around, back up, look at all the sandstone, and I'll start talking again when we get down to the flat area. If you watch my other SHAFER Trail video, you know that this was originally a cattle trail. The SHAFER brothers, I think they were, from memory, had a little ranch down below, and they needed a way. Actually, I don't know if the ranch was on top or on the bottom, but anyway, they used this little road to get their cattle to market. This is a good place to spin the camera over to the cliffside. You can see the trail down below. You do have to be careful about traffic going the other way. That motorcycle rider, he was the only one who really didn't seem to be paying attention. He seemed to be on a speed run, trying to go up as fast as he could, and I don't think he had a clue I was there until I really was there. People are nice, and when they had a wide spot to stop, they did to let me go. A little earlier, you'll see that I stopped and waited at a wide spot in the road for somebody coming the other direction. This is another great place to look down, pan it over to the right, and you can see how low the trail goes. There's another car way down there. I had hill descent control on during some of the trip, and at least on the Hyundai, it was pretty squirrely. It would brake inappropriately at times, and this was one place where it was a little bit squirrely. It was uncomfortable. It braked a little too hard, and there was a little sliding going on, and then you can see this other car is coming up the ridge. So little moments like that are a little bit clenching, shall we say, but basically, for the most part, I just put it in drive. I did put it, and there's the automatic braking thing. It broke for no apparent reason. Don't know why. That's Hyundai's hill descent control just decided to stop. The paddle shifts didn't work, but for whatever reason, there it is again. And now I'm finding the wide spot in the road for the car to come by. So that's the kind of thing you have to do. You can see it's fairly far off, but I didn't know if there was a wide spot up ahead, so I stopped here. And as I'm pulling over to make room for this car to go by, plenty of room. Please leave comments. I read every one of them. Let me know what you think of these. Tell me if you think they're valuable, if you want to use them to just for entertainment to see what the trail's like, or do you use it for trip planning? Or if you wish I wouldn't do them at all and would just stick to my normal video, that's valuable for me to know as well. I do have to push stuff out. The algorithm on YouTube wants you to put stuff out every couple of weeks or several times a week, and my videos take months to make, so I can't do that. So this is a way for me to put out content, which I think is valuable, but let me know if you think it's not. You do have to go slow around the corners because you don't know if there's a car coming the other direction. And this time, luckily he saw me and he stopped and let me by. So you take turns. You just have to be nice to your fellow travelers, and then everything's pretty much fine. But please take the time to look at the geology. It is incredible that we're allowed to drive down a road like this. If you're doing this on your phone, you're not really doing it justice. If you can do it on a big, huge TV where you can control where the camera looks, I highly recommend it. That was a rental Jeep. From here on out, you can see we're only about 13 minutes in, and that was really the hard part. Now we're going to keep on going down, but it's pretty straight from here for quite a while. And the road is in pretty good shape. You got to make sure you don't go too fast here. It may look simple, but it's still an off-road, bumpy, and you don't know where the rocks are and where they're not. So don't get overconfident. This is another spot where I gotta say I got a little overconfident. I did do my best to keep my speed down. I think I had abandoned the downhill descent and just had it in low at this point. I had it in second gear, I believe, and which was plenty. You don't really want to go too fast around here because there are still a few blind corners. But this little downslope does allow you to look around, especially if you're a passenger, to see the amazing terrain. And think about how in the world did somebody raise cattle down here? Yeah, I was surprised by the number of pickups and other vehicles going the other direction this time. In my previous trips, I maybe saw one. I did see some cyclists in the past, but I've never seen this many cars going the other direction. I think it's because it's such a popular trail now that it's much easier to do going the other direction. When I tried it 10 or 15 years ago, it was so poorly marked that I didn't really know I was going which way I was going. I didn't know if I was on the right trail or not, so I actually turned around. But these days they say it's quite easy, heading from Moab through Potash and then up this magnificent trail. Now we're coming to a very important spot. The place where you need to turn left to continue on the Potash Road. The SHAFER Trail, by name anyway, I think officially ends at this intersection up ahead. If you go straight, you're on the White Rim Trail, which is over 100 miles long and incredibly rough. Requires a Jeep or real off-road 4x4 vehicle. And it takes 2 days. There is some signage that tells you which way to go, and there are not many signs on this trail. I turned left, and I think the sign said it was 32 miles back to Moab from this point, which means we've been traveling about 8 miles? I can't remember, 6 or 8 miles. In this, though we're in the lower spot, you might think all the hard part is over. Well, that's simply not true. We keep spinning around because the sights are amazing. But as you go through this little canyon, notice how narrow it is here. It would be much more difficult if there was a car heading in the other direction. But the road is also much ruttier here, and you have to go slower. It's much trickier and more technical down here than it is during the big descent at the beginning. And it's important also to remember, at least I think, to stop, get out of your car, take a look around, take a few pictures. It's a magnificent place. And when there's no wind, it's one of those places with the sound of silence. You don't hear anything. Maybe a hawk flapping its wings. I stopped a few times on this trip, and one of these is coming up. Do I wish I would have stopped more? Maybe. And it was rather rough over here. And again, another blind corner, hoping that nobody was coming the other way. The layers in the rock. Pretty cool. And right here at the white spot in the road, this is where I decided to stop and take a few pictures. Soon I was back, and if the camera is now pointing out the rear, it's because, again, I mounted the camera backwards. So click on the image and spin it around to the front again, or any other way you want to look. This is a wash, and I've been on here, this is I think my 5th time down this road, and I have seen water down here, and when it's there, well, you probably don't want to be there. And this road up was quite rough. It's a little steeper than it looks. The car had no trouble getting up it, but it was a little bit tricky. There are times, I can't remember if this is one of them or not, when the all-wheel drive was beeping at me for slippage. But generally, just about any vehicle can get up here, as we'll see in a bit, even a sedan. Coming up, there's something that really surprised me. I've been on this trail before and I never really noticed it before, but there's an outhouse here. A little flat area where they actually have a little pit toilet and a parking area. I did stop in there for a while and took a look around, took some more pictures, and also marveled at the sight that I had never seen before. You can see even the pickup, if you spin it around and watch the pickup go up, he's going nice and slow. It's something that you have to do on this incredible trail. Again, the camera's probably pointing out the back, so you have to spin it around to the front, unless you like looking backwards. Because again, I mounted the camera backwards. Now getting to the area that's not far from Dead Horse Point, which means we're getting close to the river. And this area has seen water before, and it can also be tricky. And this is slick rock here. I have normal street tires on the car, and it was able to handle it just fine. But who knows what damage it'll cause in the future. But it was quite rough in here. So take your time. And as they say, we're not here to make good time to get there quickly. We're here to have a good time. So you take all the time that you need. And this guy had to back up. I didn't see him. Luckily he saw me. He was in a Ford Bronco. He backed up to a wide spot in the road. And he waved goodbye, waved thank you, and acknowledged the courtesy that he gave us. This is the actual marker where the grade is. We're now officially out of Canyonlands. It's now a county road, believe it or not. That's what those signs were saying as we're leaving. And this was tricky. say challenging, but a little trickier than I had remembered it. Can't really tell here, but those ruts and those rocks are fairly large. And because I'm in this new Hyundai, all the new cars these days have relatively low profile tires, which of course are horrible for this type of work. And you can't even get them without them. So these are 19-inch tires, 19-inch rims. They're only 55 profile tires, which means they're very low profile. It's just the last thing you want to do in a situation like this. So I was being very careful, going very slow. I did have a patch kit and a pump and a compressor and all that stuff with me in case something happened. But in a situation like this, you're much better off having smaller wheels and more tire. And somewhere up there is Dead Horse Point State Park. Yeah, this was a tricky spot. That is a pretty big little drop off. But again, take the time to look around. It's a good place to spin around and look. If you're really into geology, and I'd love it if a geologist was watching this, you can talk about the layers of the mudstone there. Of course, all of this was a part of the western interior seaway about 80 to 70 to 90 million years ago. And that's when a lot of this stuff was deposited, I believe. And this is the shelf. They call this shelf the White Rim, which is why, of course, the trail is named that. And apparently it's 1,200 feet below where we started. And somewhere around here is where Thelma and Louise, in that movie from a long time ago, drove off the cliff to kill themselves as opposed to being stopped by the law. And up here to the left, I'm seeing a little rendering errors on the stitching of the VR. I have to fix that somehow. But that's where Dead Horse Point is off to our left at this point. And the river, the Colorado, is off to the right. I'm pulling off over here not to take a look, see, but because the road was smoother. It was rather bumpy over here. This is one of the spots where you can overlook the Colorado, but I did not stop here. And we're now right below Dead Horse Point. In my previous video, I called this spot Beautiful Desolation. And I still think it's a great name for it. It really is a pretty place in the middle of nowhere. And no, there's not cell phone coverage in most of this trail. At some point, I did get some, the phone did kick in and I got a bunch of messages. But there's a BMW station wagon making it all the way. And this, I believe, is a little Chevy. So you can see just about any car can make it on the road if you go slow enough and aren't stupid. Again, here you might want to spin the camera around because I think we're looking out the back side. But again, this is one of the great spots to turn and look around. If I'm getting repetitious, I apologize. But it really is an interesting spot. If you don't want to drive it yourself, this video is probably the best way to see it. Please spin around as much as possible. You can zoom in as well. And the road here is rather bad. Okay, I admit it. I may have been getting a little bit tired of the bouncing at this point. We're about 40 minutes in, and there was still another 15 to 30 minutes of bouncing around. And I was wondering if the car would make it. It's 102 degrees, and I know that my favorite part from the previous trips was looking down at the river. And from here on out, it's just, I mean, it's still nice, and we have the potash ponds coming up, which are very colorful. But, and the sky was getting kind of interesting, though. But I must admit, I was getting a little tired of the bouncing by this point. And now we're coming up to another viewpoint, which frankly, I had forgotten about. And I wasn't alone. You can see there's a tour guide up ahead. He had some paying customers in his Jeep. And this is another overlook of the river down below. And unfortunately, I can't insert photos here and maintain the VR feature. Maybe I'll learn how to do that later, but at the present, I don't know how to make that happen. So you don't get to see the overlook. You have to look at my other videos for that, which of course are on the West is Big channel, which I'm sure most of you know. And the tour guides, where are they? Well, there's several of them in Moab. I don't think they're terribly cheap. It's certainly in the hundreds of dollars. I think several $100s if there's a whole family. But it's probably worth it, especially if you don't want to beat up your own car. From here, we still have to drop down another 600 feet or so down to the river. So there's still quite a bit of descending to do, but most of it is like this, pretty gentle. And here, there's not even any big rocks. There's a semi-balanced rock coming up ahead. There's a lot of photo opportunities here. This isn't one of the better ones, but I do get a kick out of seeing this rock. And yes, I did take a picture of it. There's a much better balanced rock coming up. It's never a good idea to get overconfident on this road. So remember, we still have to go down quite a bit. And this part wasn't terribly tricky, but it had to be negotiated. And you never know when there's a big rock, so never go too fast. Even that little bump there was actually fairly significant. And again, remember to spin around. Now we got some interesting clouds too. And these roads were all apparently made by uranium miners back in the day. And if you know anything about Moab history, you know that there was a big uranium mine, and it caused quite a bit of contamination, and now one of the major job functions or major employers in the town is a cleanup operation, an EPA cleanup operation that is, actually I think it's Department of Energy, to clean up all the contamination. And here, yes, the road is pretty smooth, and I might have hit 20 miles an hour here, maybe even 25 in places. Most of the way you're doing about 10, 12. But if you're somebody who likes isolation or quiet or getting away from it all, this trail is a great way to do that. And that little butte on the left, spin around, is a bit of a landmark. Means we're coming up to the potash area where the ponds are. It's a potash mine. They used to have mine shafts, and they used to send people down there, but several years ago, decades ago, there was an accident and people died. So since then, they have decided just to pump it out. They push a water slurry down there, pump it out into these evaporation ponds, and eventually over time they add the blue dye, which is very colorful, to accelerate the evaporation process. But it's much safer, though of course provides fewer jobs. Another little problem we have here is we're 56 minutes in. I had 2 batteries, but one of them, though I know I fully charged it, but apparently I didn't, because it didn't have any charge left. So this video is about to end. It's 57 minutes plus long, almost 58. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you put up with it. It's not as good as my normal videos. It's not as detailed. There's not as much information. I didn't spend weeks on the script and hours recording it. But this is a way to allow you to control what you see. You can see what it's really like to drive the trail in a way it's not a documentary. This is it. This is how it is. So I hope you appreciate it. If you stuck around this far, you obviously did. So please give it a like. And if you're not already, subscribe. And please know that the rest of my channel and all the detailed work, the hundreds and hundreds of hours that go into my other videos, does continue when I have the time, when I'm not making video for paying clients. Oh, and there's the potash ponds in the distance. They are quite colorful. I will update the documentary that I've done on the trail. That, again, you can watch the current one on YouTube, and I will include this video and others that I shot while I was in Moab this time. So please check it out, return to my channel, and let me know what you think of all this VR video.